John Blackwood, welcome back to the Scottish Property Podcast.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
It's been a while.
I know it has been a long time.
Last time we did a Zoom call, that was back in the days where we were just doing it from our bedrooms. But we've stepped the game up.
Too much information there, Nick.
I was going to say in my underwear. Yeah.
We've got the lights, camera, and it's action time.
Very good.
So it's always good to have an in-person chat with you, because I see quite a lot of you as well on the SAL calls, because I'm a member, letting agent member, and get a huge amount of value out of it. So big thank you to you and the team straight off the bat. You know, if anybody's listening to this and they are a landlord, get signed up with SAL. We're not getting a payment for this, but it is a good service, and we've had loads of help from the team on various different. There's always something that
of course there is, and that's why we're there to help.
Exactly. So listen, landlords are we're taking a lot of hits from everywhere at the moment. You would have seen it firsthand. Obviously, you're dealing with the policymakers, the decision makers, the government. So we're hoping to get a wee bit of insight into what's going on in the background there. But just a quick touch on, as we speak here today, the news is just broken today on the 30th of October. This will be going out in a couple of weeks' time, so it's probably the dust is settled. But your initial reaction to Rachel Reeves renting out her family home without a landlord licence?
No, you couldn't make it up, could you? Really? So every day when I put on the news now, I think, here we go again. Here's something else. This is the third minister, you know, and obviously in a very senior post, who's come a cropper by obviously somehow not understanding what they should be doing. And you would think that these are the people who, of course, make the laws. They should know them, and they should be, more importantly, abiding by them. And of course, the whole idea that, well, I didn't know, nobody told me, that's not an excuse we would accept from landlords.
You wouldn't get away with it,
Exactly. Yeah. So why would we accept it from government ministers? So I think it's ludicrous when you think about it and when you sit back. You're right, you know, the dust might settle over the next few days. The press will be keen to pick up on it, and no doubt
the media will jump on it. But
so will the Tories.
Oh, definitely. It's happening already.
They won't let go, But then the budget's coming up in a few weeks' time as well, so there may be more pressing things coming up.
Yeah.
But then I think to myself, well, at least she's one of us now. She's a landlord, so maybe she'll see it.
Well, a lot of them are, to be fair, and that's what a lot of the tenants groups say. There's a lot of elected members who are landlords themselves. So the question arises, how can they be impartial when making these laws? But nobody's impartial when you're in politics.
I wouldn't like to be the letting agent in that scenario. You know, because obviously there's we haven't heard from the letting agent yet, because obviously she's gone to a letting agent.
Yeah.
And you would hope that the letting agent would have said, by the way.
It's one of the advantages of using an agent, isn't it? They should be keeping you right, and it's their job to tell you what you need to do. But maybe you need to get them on the next podcast.
Yeah, maybe I don't know what they are doing down there in England. You might speak to your colleagues down there, but the latest renters reform bill, is the licensing getting rolled into, is that going to be a thing with the renters reform? Is there going to be every landlord needs to get a license? Because
so
that would
I'm
make it
not
a lot
too sure
straightforward.
exactly the detail of that, because obviously it's more concentrated on what's happening in England and Wales. And they're talking a lot about, of course, changes to tenancy regime and eviction grounds and the end to no-fault evictions, which is so 2017 for us. You know,
we laugh at that.
We've been there and bought the t-shirts.
So past it.
And they're so panicking about that, aren't they, as well? They're actually panicking.
But to be fair, we did as well. So a way back then, it's the fear of the unknown, isn't it? Just thinking, what's that's going to happen? How's it going to affect my business, and how am I going to see my way through it? And in reality,
it doesn't really affect.
Well, I remember doing the Letwell course back in 2017, and remember it was when you were doing the presentations in the hotels and that. So everybody would be in the one room, obviously, and you get to network with other agents. And that was just at the time where the PRT was kicking in December 2017, I think it was. And obviously, like, I was a new agent, so I was brand new to it. And I was obviously speaking during the breakout sessions and at lunch and that. You would be speaking to the kind of older school agents, you know, and they were like, why are you getting into this? This is like, you know, it's game over. It's terrible what they're doing here and all the rest of it. And, you know, 8 years later, I'm here with a decent sized lettings business and it's going well. So
it can work. And, last night I was speaking to a group of landlords in Falkirk, and, for new people coming into the sector, and some of them are brand new, and they asked the question, what do I need to know as a landlord? Mm-hmm. And I just think, right, and I'll tell you. So, and see if you're still interested in half an hour's time. And actually they just take it and they just say, right, okay, that's what I need to do. I'll go and do it.
See, Stephen here, he doesn't like to call himself a landlord, although he's got about 100 properties, but he likes to call himself an investor. So going on that, and you obviously have your own view on why you don't like to be labelled a landlord, but there is that kind of negative perception. How have you seen that develop over the last, 20
I think
years?
It is a big issue, and it's something we need to address head on. And certainly, Sal, we've been talking a lot about that over the last couple of years. That do we find a new name? Because
housing provider.
One extreme you could say, it's misogynistic. Does it really describe what we are? Mm-hmm. Yes, we're property investors, and that's the primary reason for being in it. Mm-hmm. But we are housing providers as well. And, you've got housing associations and councils, they're landlords too, but they don't seem to describe themselves as a landlord.
So if we change the name for landlords, what would we call tenants?
Well, often we're hearing them being referred to as renters now rather than tenants.
That's true.
So, which is a good term. I quite like that. But what for landlords, and that's the big question. So I think we're in this dilemma just now. We either just rethink it, come up with a new name that we all can buy into.
Hopefully it'll stick.
Or we own it. We just accept, that is what we are, especially when I speak to some women in the sector and say, do you like this word landlord? And they say, but that is what I am. Mm-hmm. That's what we do.
Yeah. So that's kind of my view on it.
We need to own it. And I think that's the issue. I'm sure you've been in similar situations, but often joke that you're maybe out with pals and for dinner in somebody's house or out somewhere, and you go round the table and what do you do for a living? What do you do? And of course I say, I'm a landlord, because that's what I am. And normally there's a minute of silence after that, but then they start talking and say, well, actually I've got a property that I rent out and
so you're a
we buy to let. I went, okay, so you're a landlord? Oh, no, I'm not a landlord. I said, so at what point do you become a landlord? And it's all this, I'm frightened to say it, I'm frightened to own it, and actually I don't want to admit it either.
Because it's that bias towards what the landlord used to be. Like I suppose before there was much compliance and it was very early on in the industry, and I did get a bit of a bad reputation, and the properties weren't upkept. And even when I speak to trades, or I'm saying to John, I'll never let them pick my kitchen or a bathroom and stuff, because it's like, well, what's the purpose of this property? Oh, it's for one of my properties in the portfolio. Oh, it's just a rental. And I hate that term that people, I can derogatory refer to this property as substandard accommodation, but it's not. And I've been trying to kick that for years and years. So when I hear the landlord, I'm like, no, I'm not a landlord. I'm a property investor, and I'm investing into a quality asset to find a quality home, and it's like trying to kick that. And
but then maybe you need to take that further and say, but I'm providing a home for someone, and I want to provide the best home I possibly can. And that's what we're trying to do as Sal. Our vision, our mission there really is to say we want to provide the best homes possible in Scotland. As private landlords, I believe we can do that. I can believe we can do that 100%. Better than any council or housing association. And when you think about the relationships we develop with tenants, I could tell you every name of every tenant that I have, even with a growing portfolio. Sure, you can as well. You know their story. They know your story. You can communicate with them, whereas with some housing associations and councils, I'm sure they wouldn't be able to talk about the personal relationships.
Nameless, it's faceless.
I think it's quite sad in a way. It's a societal, generational change as well, I guess, as well. But it used to be quite an aspirational thing to, owning a rental property or a buy-to-let property, because, obviously you were putting that aside for maybe pension play later on in life and stuff, but now it's kind of frowned upon, isn't it? And it's like, you're taking homes out of society, greedy landlords.
Exactly. It's just priorities change and perceptions change. But, say I'm older than yourselves, but, when I was a kid, if you were to think about landlord, it was basically that somebody who let slum properties, and they were the rich people of the land, basically. They weren't ordinary people like us. And of course that changed in the 90s in particular, and when we had deregulation in the late 80s. So there was an incentive to invest in the private rented sector. And that brought in a new generation of landlords. So, and
the everyday normal person.
Yeah.
So you've personally become a target for some of the landlord tenant groups and stuff like that. I've seen.
I have noticed.
Do you want me to send you the clips?
Yeah, I've seen some.
You've tried to stir them up to get them on the podcast as well.
So you've been on a BBC debate with them. So
I tried to throw John Blackwood under the bus, and he said no, and I tried to throw you under the bus. No one else was answering the phone that day.
So obviously I'm talking about live and rent, and they do what they do, which is fair enough. Because they've got their agenda. They want to fight for tenants' rights. There's nothing wrong with that.
But we believe in them as well.
Exactly. This is it. And this is where obviously you had your disagreements with the girl from Living Rent that you went on to debate on BBC. But a lot of what she was saying was like, well, I believe in that as well. I believe that we should be providing good quality homes, warm, a lot.
We are not the enemy. We're actually part of the solution. It's trying to get that point across.
And it is. This is what annoys me more than anything, especially with politicians and different lobby groups and the media, is to pitch one against the other. So it's always landlords versus tenants, and it's bad landlord, good tenant. And I don't think that's helpful to the discussion. And I want to get beyond that and say, actually, do you know what? We want landlords to be doing the right thing, providing the best accommodation, having the highest standards, and actually providing affordable homes as well too. Because, for instance, when it comes to rent, and of course that's been the big topic for debate for a wee while now, renting unaffordable homes at extortionate rents isn't in the landlord's interest.
It's in no one's interest, is it?
And when I say that, people don't believe that and say, the landlord will come a cropper one day with that, because at some point your rent will become unaffordable to your tenant. They won't be able to pay, and you won't get any rent at all, because the chances are they just won't pay you. Yeah. And you will be stuck with rent arrears and probably debt as a result of that. That's not good for you. It's not good for your tenant. So we need to get that balance right between landlords and tenants.
I'm talking about balance. Part of the government's obviously argument and strategy for coming up with the latest housing bill was to try and address the imbalance maybe that some people were saying is still in the landlord's favour. So the new housing bill. What is it? Housing bill? What do they call it? What's the official name for it?
Housing Scotland bill.
Housing Scotland bill. Right. So, we'll not go into the absolute nuts and bolts of it because we could be here forever. But was that, and I am thinking back to the days of Patrick Harvey, was it pretty much getting pushed, the starting push, was it pretty much Patrick Harvey? I'm sure it was, wasn't it? Yeah. The Green Party and then...
Yeah, and I think, to get back to the point of creating that balance, there's always been a perceived imbalance. And, when I started off in my professional life in housing, and it was, as with most folk, it's by accident, and it was supporting homeless people in the private rented sector. And I was trying to encourage landlords to accept homeless people as tenants and saying, actually, this could be a good opportunity for you, and we'll support the tenants and sustain the tenancies. And I remember back then, the homeless people, the prospective tenants themselves were just saying, but, the law's all on the landlord's side. There's nothing there to support me. And that was true. And then I went to work with landlords. I became a landlord myself and thought this is something I want to get involved in, speaking to other landlords, and they were saying the same thing, saying the law's all against us. Nobody supports us. And I thought, actually, you can't both be right. So, and it is about perception, isn't it? It's about, how do you perceive the law, and it depends on what's happening in your business at that particular time. And when we started SAL nearly 25 years ago, about 25 next year, we very much said that it's not just about pushing for landlords' rights.
You've been there since the start?
Yeah, I started SAL.
All right.
I was one of the founders.
Right, okay.
So obviously I was very young at the time, so that's what you're going to say now. But yeah, back at that time we thought we needed a group of landlords to come together and develop an organisation that promoted balance, and that's in our constitution. We want to create a balance between the rights of landlords and tenants, and that's what we'll champion. So it's not all just for landlords.
So Patrick Harvey then, did you ever meet him?
Yeah, quite a few times.
Right.
As you can imagine, we don't agree. So One thing I've always admired about him is you know where you stand with him. And he's true to his own politics. And I admire that in any politician, whether I agree with them.
The way that used to really annoy me was when he came on the radio and he talked about the one experience that he'd had, I think as a student, where he had been, renting a property that was substandard and all the rest of it. And like we said before, of course, there are landlords out there that are slum landlords that we want to get rid of. Want to.
And we've got the legislation to do that. We've campaigned for that for years because that's our competition. We want to get rid of them from the sector.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's in nobody's interest to have them there. And the trouble is, they're still there, despite the fact that we've got legislation. That's wrong. And we all should be fundamentally
they're
working
in a smaller number now. Of course, but but to hold on to that grudge from 25, 30 years ago just seems, doesn't give you the politics of that.
Well, exactly, and I think it says a lot. But he certainly is driven by that, and it's very much the position of the Greens. I often talk about in talking to politicians all the time, and MSPs in particular. I had a conversation with one a wee while ago now, and they turned around to me and said, "John, you do know what you do is immoral." And I just had to take a breath and think, well, that's what I'm up against.
Well, there was a headline.
So I assume they were thinking I was a landlord.
Well, there was a headline recently.
What's the debate?
Sorry?
What's their argument that what you're doing is immoral?
Because some people just believe fundamentally, and it is a philosophical position, that it's wrong for somebody to own property that somebody else lives in and calls home.
And profit out of a human right, basically.
Exactly, because, essentially you're lording it over that person who's living in that home. So you have a superiority over them. And some people believe that that's morally wrong. So,
but if you don't own it, who owns it?
Well, so you then would move on to say, well, what's the alternative? And is that state-owned accommodation? And some people believe, there shouldn't be home ownership at all, actually, in this country. We all should be living in state-owned accommodation and have a set wage where we all earn the same amount, etc., etc. And on paper, that maybe sound great, but that's not where we are.
No.
That's not the world we live in.
Yeah, we live in it.
And the issue is we need... This is the message I always try and get across. Despite all these changes that happen in legislation and politicians maybe not liking us, and certainly we don't win votes for politicians, we know that because there's many more renters out there than landlords, but they need us because who else is going to provide the accommodation? So there's still going to be a future for us. The question is it going to be us that's going to be providing it?
Yeah, I think the latest stats was it's 10,000 children are in temporary or homeless accommodation, and obviously that's possibly not the same sector. Arguably you'd say, well, that's social,
but you have to think, well, what's the root cause of this? It's lack of affordable social housing. That's what this is all about.
Which the private sector is not there to fulfill.
Exactly. And we've been forced to provide that. And actually, when you think about it, we're not the best place to do it. We're not social workers. No. We don't have experience in all these different issues that affect many tenants and families up and down the country. But we're being forced to do that because they've got nowhere else to go. So they're coming, knocking on our doors, looking for homes. So the issue is lack of social housing that's affordable to everybody. But equally, lack of appropriate housing. We're not building enough houses to meet anybody's needs. So it's lack of accommodation, and there's pressure put on the private rented sector to house, quite frankly, everybody. And it was never designed to do that. In fact, our questions now is, what is it designed to do? What should it be doing? And that's where the future should be.
Do you think that the perception, the kind of sentiment on landlords, if you like, would be changed if we weren't housing people on benefits and people kind of with lower incomes and all that? Because is that not where landlords start getting a bad name when rents go up? People who are struggling with the cost of living crisis and all this, does that add to the kind of negativity?
It's maybe part of the picture, but I think you have to always think at the end of the day, the landlord is always going to be seen as the rich person who's got the cash to invest in property, which not everybody has, let's face it, and they've got the asset of owning that home. So, and some people just fundamentally feel that's wrong or don't like it or think, well, you're better off than what I am, and for that reason, I don't like you, and that's wrong. So when it comes to issues like taxation and all of this, nobody's going to fight in the general public for landlords to have tax breaks, for instance. So the more a landlord is taxed, they'll be rubbing their hands saying that's a good idea.
Talking about the tax and obviously the budget coming up, and there's talk of, I don't know if you had the rumours about the national insurance.
Of course.
The 8% on rental income. Surely that would be a huge blow to a lot of.
I think that would be a deal breaker for many of us, and I'm one of them included in that. I think what we have to always be mindful of is the Treasury is very good at leaking information and ahead of a budget.
To see what the reaction is.
Exactly. And it's just, we know it's not just about this subject, but pensions, everything. We're hearing in the last few days about it could be a 2% increase on taxes, a 2p increase in tax. So that would be a major blow for everybody as well. But again, I think it's just sensing the public's reaction. And from that, they'll take the lead as to what they do. And, as I say, there's no votes in supporting landlords. So Treasury's got a job of trying to raise as much income as it can through growth, which they keep talking about and doesn't seem to quite be happening. And other avenues, of course, taxation. So landlords are an easy hit.
Yeah. Do you know how many landlords are actually in Scotland, registered in Scotland?
So we're looking at about 250,000
so
registered.
A minority.
So yeah.
Of voters.
And certainly compared to the rest of the UK, it's a small sector as well. Obviously, the PRS is a much bigger sector in England.
There's a stat as well, which the majority, I can't remember if it's like 90% or something like that. It's a huge percentage of landlords are just single property owners.
Oh, it's about 95%. It's something we've been doing research on. The advantage is we've got landlord registration in Scotland, so we've got some data to back this up. But what's that telling us? Well, the majority of landlords in Scotland have just one or two properties. That's what we're looking at, by far the majority.
And this national insurance introduction will be possibly be the nail in the coffin on the majority of them.
And they'll be working people, ordinary people. So, this is our job, this is our profession, but the majority of landlords with one or two properties,
just working people.
They're working somewhere else.
What is the feedback? Because you guys send out these surveys and all the rest of it. So what are the reasons for selling?
I think a lot of it is just legislation's getting too much. The legislation creep over the last few years has just been, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, isn't it? It's just that I can't cope with anymore because I've got a busy life as it is. I've got lots of things going on, even within their own work life as well, and trying to keep up with constant changes in legislation. And it makes them think, is it worth it? I was mentioning when we started, Sal, one of the reasons why we started SAL was because of HMO licensing. That was coming away. That was coming in 2000. And in 99 with the introduction of very new Scottish Parliament, and it was very much focused on housing's a devolved issue, so we've got time to legislate in the sector. And HMO licensing was the first hit. And way back then, we were all saying, this is going to kill our sector. This is it. There'll be no more HMOs in Scotland. This will go. And of course, well...
proof
is in the pudding.
Stephen's got a big HMO up in, what is it?
Aberdeen,
How many units? 1 million?
27 rooms in it,
But we were saying at that time, nobody's going to invest because the regulation that was introduced was onerous at the time. So it has changed over the time. But that was the first major bit of legislation. And it made us, I was part of a small group of landlords in Edinburgh. There was one in Inverness. And in the south of Scotland, and we were all coming together saying, this is terrible, what can we do about this? And we went to the government, and the Scottish executive, as it was, knew at that time, and said, this is terrible, you need to listen to us, or we're all going to sell up, we're all going to leave. And the senior civil servant at that time turned around and said, I don't want to hear from Edinburgh landlords or Inverness landlords. I want to speak to a Scottish association. And said, that's what we need in Scotland. So from that,
this is what made you say
we left that meeting, thought, well, let's give them it, because we had to get permission to call ourselves the Scottish Association as well. So that started us, and little did we know that was the first bit of legislation that was going to be coming in.
So what I've been speaking to people is that people have been struggling with that have a small amount of properties in their own name is the Section 24 tax. So it's obviously taking a while.
Obviously that was a Westminster decision.
Yeah.
So that was the last big hit for all landlords. And these things all have a cumulative effect. I don't think there's one thing that I could pinpoint and said, that's it. There's been things that perhaps have more contributed to it than others. But if you've just got the one property or two properties, or if you're getting near that retirement age, as many landlords are, then you maybe just think, I can't be bothered anymore.
Yeah. See, fancy making £1,500 for sending a WhatsApp? Let's take a wee break to talk about referring sellers to John and Lewis at Prime Property Auctions. The boys have paid out over £350,000 in referral fees. Myself and Stephen have both done it, and it couldn't be easier.
If you know someone selling a property, the guys will pay you £1,500 or 1% of the sale price, whatever is higher, just for passing their details. Doesn't matter if the seller is already on with an agent or not, as long as you're in direct contact with the seller, just drop the guys a message and they'll do everything from the first call to getting the property sold. If you know someone might be looking to sell or struggling to get the result with their own agent, go to the link in the show notes and send them a message now.
Those of us notice.
Yeah.
They just think, I'm going to sell.
So like you say, so we were talking about this early on about how possibly there's different demographics because we've got a community here that we've built through the podcast, and we have people on constantly again who are growing their portfolios aggressively through limited company. And these are buy-to-let properties. You know, it's nothing fancy. It's just buy-to-let. They're buying them run down. They're spending 20 grand doing them up, and then they're refinancing, adding them to the portfolio. And we know loads of people that are buying, and clients of the letting agency as well who are still buying. So, and then you're saying that, you know, you maybe have like a more older demographic who are kind of just like that. This is just not worth it anymore. I can't be bothered with it. And you do hear that sometimes. I go in the calls and I do hear quite a lot of that. Just people moaning.
And you've commented on that. I think it was one of your podcasts, because I do listen to your podcast, by the way.
Hopefully we said good things about it.
But one of them, you did mention that. You did say, I go in the SAL meetings and there's a lot of negativity and doom and gloom, but you're not hearing that from the communities that you're mixing it. And that made me sit back and think, and I've since commented on it on our sessions online, that actually all of it is true. So, you know, if you look at SAL, our membership has grown quite dramatically in the last few years, despite landlords leaving. Yes, we've got people selling up. We know that. We see it within our own figures. But there's new people coming in. They're not necessarily, as we see it, young people. So that's an issue for us to be looking at. But there was a statistic I was looking at the other week that actually the biggest buy-to-let growth, especially in England, has been young people who are getting into buy-to-let market now. There's been a big spur in that in the last year. That's interesting because they're not homeowners. So our future landlords actually will be renters themselves. So they're seeing it as an opportunity. Not just to make money in the future, like what I was thinking of, it was pension for me. That's why I get into it. But they're thinking of it as income because they're thinking, I don't want to work for somebody else 9 to 5 or all hours of the day, Monday to Friday. I want to actually have a bit of me time, and this will supplement my income if I reduce my hours. So young people are thinking about lifestyles very different as to what even we did.
It's funny when you look at if you look at some, you know, the landlord that maybe bought in 1999 or 2000, and the introduction from HMO license to gas safeties, EICRs. I'm trying to name them.
We only had gas safety when I started.
Yeah.
So, and that's all we had at that time.
It's very much just been one after another. Every couple of years there's been a new change. If you get the new person coming in, they've just like say spoke to you at an event and says, right, what do I need to do? Well, you need to register as a landlord. You need to your gas safety, your electrical, your Legionellas, they're going to rattle through it and they're going to go, okay, I'm doing it. Whereas the tired person is going, something else. I need to change something else. I need to do something else.
And most of the clients, I've got a list that I said new landlord clients that start, and it's now I've had to add on the lead test certificate as well on the bottom, so it's another thing. But very few of them actually moan about it. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like just that's the way it is.
Expected to know what to do with it, but
and actually, it all means there's a better standard, isn't it? And there's safer properties and. That is something we all should be signing up.
Not that I'm going to lead test my own house for my own drinking water, but
you can die of lead poisoning in the family, but
because that's different. You're not renting it to somebody else to do it, so that's your responsibility. But
so if I kill my family, we have this joke in the house all the time. So if something happens at one of our let properties,
fixed immediately.
Let's get fixed within 24 hours. And Lisa, my wife's like that. When are you going to get right to fixing that cupboard door that's been off the hinges for the last 2 months? That would have been done if it was in your lettings book.
The tradesman's own house is the one that's never repaired and fixed.
Going back to the housing bill then, because we got rid of, that sounds terrible, but that was how I felt at the time. We got rid of Patrick Harvey through the end of the Butte House agreement, and then we thought, relief. But really they continued on that kind of direction of travel, because it was already kind of, the wheels are in motion. With the rent controls really was the major probably driver, because they felt, and I think it was Nicola Sturgeon really that came in quite hard on that, with obviously protecting tenants during the pandemic and all that protection, that we had the rent freeze, which was like we couldn't up rents at all. And then obviously we came out of that, and then it went from 6% maximum increase to, was it 3%? I don't know. There was a trickle down. Sorry, so there was a 6, then a 3, then it was a right. That's it. Ended. You can do whatever you want now within reason. The tenant can dispute, and all the rest of it. And now we're at the point where the housing bill has been debated.
Probably back then, it caused a huge, massive rental price inflation.
Well, that's it. What was your view on that period?
So it did, and actually, we were talking earlier about Scottish Letting Day, our national conference last week, but the guy from Zoopla there, and he would be good to have on the podcast.
We'll get him
on ours recently.
Richard.
Yeah. Oh, please don't pin me down. I'm terrible with folks' names, but you're right. So I'll make sure you.
We use the Zoopla reports on the podcast all the time for the market updates. Brilliant.
And he was great. He came and spoke at conference. He was on our podcast the other week, and he was very clear, and he was saying, actually, renting in Scotland is still a good option, and actually the yield in Scotland is higher than anywhere else in the UK, and rents have been increasing more in Scotland than anywhere else in the UK. Ironically, we're the only part of the UK that's had rent control. So when you look at that, and we've said that for a long time, international research shows that rent control does 3 things. It deters investors, puts them off, it reduces supply, and it increases rents. And that's exactly what's happened in Scotland.
Did you feed that back to the politicians and the meetings that you had?
Exactly. And what's happening, but you have to wait until you've got the evidence, you see. So, because often they'll say, you'll say that, John, won't you? But now what we're seeing, 6 months on from rent control finishing, is rents are now starting to go down.
Yeah.
And we don't have rent control.
Yeah, the market's done what the market's going to need to do.
The market's dealing with it.
It's a correction.
And I think that there's maybe a few issues to do with that, to be fair. I think certainly, the properties I'm renting in the market I'm more familiar with is in east of Scotland, so Edinburgh and around that area. So you've got high rental inflation. But I think there's always going to be a ceiling that you can't go beyond.
You can't. People can't afford it.
A typical wee 1-bedroom tenement flat in Edinburgh, you're well over £1,000 now a month rent for that. So 1,000, 1,100 I'm getting. To be fair, if you're living on your own, that's a lot of money.
Then you've got to look at wages, and if wages are not going up at the same level, then there is going to be a tipping point.
So what we're looking at with the Zoopla report is actually now they're matching wage growth and rental inflation. And that's healthy. That's where it should be. But that's without any kind of rent control at all.
Interference.
So, exactly. So the market, if the market's allowed to do what it should do, it should sort itself out.
Because it can't sustain. If no one can afford the rent, the properties won't be rented.
Exactly.
If no people can afford to rent. I did that as an example of, I think I put it to a 3-bed house in Cowdenbeath that I rented out, and the rent was $550 a month for, I think it was a 7 or 8 year period. It didn't go up. If you actually worked out the inflation, it should have been a 30% increase. But then after the rent control caps, it went up about 30%. You said you got it, you just didn't get it. Over that period, it just had a flat rent. The rents didn't rise. And then all of a sudden, there was an interference in the market, and it forced the rents to go back to where it should have really been. But like we said before, the market's going to do what the market's going to do. People okay.
Although the market only works when it comes to bringing your property to the market, and where we've gone wrong, I think, as landlords, is that if you've got a long-term tenant, you tend to just sit there and not increase the rent. And you leave it. Yeah. And that actually creates a false economy and a false expectation from your tenant as well. Yeah. So, and you're thinking, when I speak to the landlords and we talk about rent increases, and they'll say, oh, do you know what? I don't really want to have that conversation with my tenant because I've got a good tenant. I don't want to put them off. I don't want to frighten them off, make them go and look somewhere else.
It's almost a disservice.
But the rent you're charging is way below the market. They would never find other accommodation at that cost. So we're not saying obviously hike it up, but
I've been there myself. I did it myself.
You need to have that conversation with the tenants, and there is an expectation I think we all have. We don't necessarily like it, but we all have that costs go up.
Yeah.
But what tenants need to know is, how can we budget for that? How can we manage that? So if costs go up, could it be in a controlled way? I don't think people object to that, as long as they understand it and know where that's coming from.
I think that's what the rent controls, the positivity that it's came from it, I believe, is it's as a landlord that's made me realise that they do need to go up regular 3%, 2%, whatever it is a year, to make sure that it's a rise with inflation, it's at market value.
Exactly.
Whereas letting a tenant sit there for 8-9 years and not putting the rent up at all, and then they decide to move and go, oh, I can't afford anywhere else because
as you know, we offer a free advice service for all our members, and our advice line will tell you that an often asked question is, how much can I raise my rent to? This was before rent control came in. And of course the answer is you can raise it to whatever you like. There is no limit. But there was an expectation, landlords thought, oh, there must be something in law. Now we will have something in law, and whether it's implemented or not is another question. But is it maybe a guide that we could be using? And I think it is a guide. Yeah. So I think that the mantra now should be, yes, you should be regularly reviewing your rents. I'd be saying do that in partnership with your tenants. Talk to them about that. Look at what you're going to need to invest in the property. It's not just about a return. You have to put the money back in as well too, to upgrade the property. And I use this analogy that we all have costs we don't like paying, and I'm sure rent is one for renters. But equally, I don't like paying council tax. It's just something I think, what am I getting for that? But it goes up every year, and it's something that has to be paid. I get that.
The way,
but what I'm thinking is, with the tenant, if I'm able to sit down with the tenant and say, listen, costs go up, my costs are going up, tradespeople are costing more now, insurance, regulation, everything, mortgages, everything goes up. But this is your home. I want you to stay in this home. I want you to be here as long as you possibly want to and can be here.
And make it feel like your home. And it is
but there might be things I could do to this home to make it better for you. What would that be? And if the tenants turn around and say, oh, do you know what? I'm maybe doing an inspection of the property, we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, see if that tenant left, I would have to put in a new bathroom or whatever the case might well be, because these are things you have to think of in time. But that's when you would do it, or at least redecorate, recarpet, all of that. And that's what I'm tallying up in my head, and I think, right, I need to budget for this, I need to think about that. But I'm saying to the tenant, what would you want? And they might come out with something like, see that carpet in the back bedroom? I hate it. I've never liked that colour. Can I get a new carpet? No, there's nothing wrong with the carpet, but I thought, you know what, for a couple of £100, that's going to make that tenant feel a lot happier.
Change it happy.
And I'll say, but that's going to cost, and they'll say, I don't mind paying a bit more if I can see what I'm getting for it. And I think these are the conversations you can have, and saying, right, if I invest in this, that means your rent will go up by Y. Are you okay with that? And they're fine.
See, what I found like pretty unfair was, and where we do realise that you do need to put the rents up like annually at a slow pace when you look at the housing associations, right? So when we had that rent freeze or rent cap or whatever it was, then they ended it, but they didn't. They ended it for the housing associations, and some housing associations had to come in with like 9% increases. You know, because they're facing the same costs as us, the maintenance, the insurance, the whole, you know what I mean? I don't know how they lend their money. It's like bond markets and all the rest of it, but the rates went up.
It's much cheaper for them than it is for us. You know, we're in the open market when it comes to lending. They're not. But yeah, you know, that really angered me at the time, because much as their argument was right, they're saying, but we need to get the money through rents to pay for repairs, or we won't be able to do repairs.
Yeah. We're facing the same.
I think, ditto.
Yeah.
Where do you think landlords are getting the money from in the private rented sector? It's from tenants' rents as well. So surely what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And, we argued that at that time. And so, these are the conversations.
So we are where we are. The housing bill's gone through Parliament. There was amendments made, all the rest of it. It took quite a long time, all the stages. We're now waiting for the royal assent from the King. So only he can save us now. He's got to be one of the
biggest landlords
out there, right?
That's another story.
See that the housing bill. Sal's involvement was quite active through that whole process, wasn't it?
That was my life. For the and it still is, because we're now at regulation stage. So that's when you look at the detail of it.
When's it going to kick in then?
So potentially you're looking at the very least 2027, I would imagine. So things are moving at pace, but regulations need to be drafted, they need to be consulted on, which hasn't happened yet. And then when it comes to rent control, local authorities need time to gather the evidence. So that we'd be looking at 2027.
There was a woman, I can't remember her name, she spoke at the Dundee Network, podcast networking event. Is it Caroline that's the director in Sal?
No, Amanda. I think Amanda.
Yeah,
Amanda
she had mentioned something about the housing, but I think it was a day that she was speaking that had just been passed. And she says there's a section where you need the landlords to go and sign it. And I says, I'll need to remember this so I can say it on the podcast. And I forgot.
There was a section.
There was a section on it. Something to do with we need to petition a certain section.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I can tell. I think I know what you're
talking about. I knew you would remember, John.
So there was two issues. So obviously, when it comes to campaigning and lobbying, I always say, listen, any little win we get is a big win, because politicians are not going to vote for a landlord. They'll vote for a tenant before they'll support a landlord. So that's what they're going to do. So they will always go on the side of the tenant. And that's the consumer. And that's very much how law is set in Scotland. It is there to obviously protect the consumer. So away at the beginning when the bill was first introduced, and that's when Patrick Harvey was involved as the Tenants' Rights Minister, and he championed the bill, he was leading it. And when it came to increases in rents, so this whole idea as to even in a rent control area, can it go up? And that will be controlled as to how it goes up. And yes, but potentially that figure could have been set at 0%, which could mean in some areas, if a rent control area came in your area, the rent cap could be set at 0% increase for up to 5 years, which means you wouldn't be able to increase your rent for up to 5 years in some areas. And we said, that's just not right. That's not sustainable, because if costs are going up, then rent should be going up as well. It should be controlled, but there has to be a provision to increase it. So when Patrick Harvey left, it gave us an opportunity then to lobby government again. And thankfully, and it was Paul McLennan that took up that mantle. And he said to us, I think you're right. I said, I think this is wrong. And I'm going to introduce an amendment at stage 2 that will get rid of the 0% cap and introduce the CPI plus 1%. And it's at that point that the tenants groups turn around and saying, here's the politicians just kowtowing to landlords. And landlords just jump and the politicians say how high. If only that happened. But that's how they perceived it. And so that was the first major win for us. And we're quite which means potentially rents even in rent control areas could go up to 6%. Basically.
That's a good one.
6% plus.
No, the maximum would be 6. So it's CPI plus 1.
CPI plus 1. Aye, that's 6. Right. Okay, so for people listening, right? So the rule is going to be so this whole legislation in the bill. This only allows councils to exercise it if they feel like they need to.
Exactly. They have to justify it.
If rents are getting out of control and they're getting a lot of pressure, presumably, you're going to have living rent, all the tenants groups, and they've got to... I don't know, again, how they're going to assess this. What indicator can a council use to say, we need to step in now and put rent control
So it's going to be a staged process. I think the first thing, and this is a question I would like answered because none of us know the answer to it, is what rents are charged in Scotland. We don't know. We only know indicatively from market rents through your Zooplas, your Rightmoves, these internet portals. But I know I look at some of those rents and think, there's nowhere near what I'm getting in that rent. So in that area. So, we know we don't have accurate information, and that's getting better, but it's still not accurate. So we need to have accurate data. How are we going to get that? Probably through amendments to how we register as landlords and the data we provide. Maybe we'll be registering not just our details and our properties, but the rents we charge as well. And at least we would know the true value of rents in Scotland, as well as what the market is. So we would get to see that better. So it's only when
because
we've got
like you say, the data that comes out from the portals is only advertised.
It's only
new lets.
Doesn't mean to say it's achieved rents, because we've all negotiated rents with tenants. So before they move in. But that's not recorded anywhere. And as I say, likewise, we've got existing tenants that have been there for years, and they'll be way below that value. So you can't say that is typically what a one-bedroom
market
flat
value is. What the bit that I didn't really like on the rent caps, and I know working in this period where you can put the rent up to market value rent, and we're in this almost reset phase, but when you're in this rent position and there's a rent cap in place, if it's CPI plus 1, if the property requires a huge amount of money invested in it, it's not going to incentivise the landlord to say, well, I'm going to invest £20,000 into doing the kitchen, bathroom, flooring through it because this is now needing its change. They're going to say, well, I can't increase my rent past CPI plus 1, so I'm not going to get that money back or get it to a proper market value. That was a bit of concern. Was that discussed?
Yeah, and it is, because any kind of cap on any income received through rent is going to potentially deter investment in the property. So, however, the market sorts that out as well, because at the end of the day, the market would dictate how much rent you would get. So I don't think that's much different to the position we were in before. Landlords are always having to think ahead and think, I'm going to have to store some money up here and think about future investment. If it was set at 0%, then that's just a killer. And you're not only deterring investment, you're actually going to be deteriorating property condition over a period of time. And the other thing you mentioned, what's the other item, is with regards to changes in tenancies, mid-tenancy increases. And that's effectively where you've got that long-term tenant who's not paying a market rent. So they're say £200 easily below the market if they've been in there a few years. If that tenant left, you would have to offer it in a rent control area to a new tenant at that same old rent plus the CPI plus 1% or whatever it is at that particular time. And we just say that's not on. That's actually perverse. You're actually penalising landlords for keeping rents low.
But they didn't change that. They've kept that in.
So where they are, so that's what Amanda was talking about. Campaign for it, and that's very much her mantra at the moment. So we got the CPI plus 1. So that was Paul McLennan when he was minister. We've now got Mary McCallan, the new cabinet secretary, and we've been very much lobbying for this. We wanted it in the face of the bill at the time, and she said, actually, that's not the place for that. That's going to come in regulation, because in regulations, they look at exemptions, and that's when we'll be looking at that. So the good news is, and she mentioned at our she wasn't there in person at our conference. She had a video message there for us. But she was saying that I'm minded to look at that. She says, I think there is merit there in looking at below market rents as being exempt from rent control. So if it's significantly below market rent. So we don't have a definition of that yet. Now that's a huge win if we get that. And that's something we're very much still campaigning.
I mean, going back, that's a huge thing. Like you say, it's a massive thing. The problem is if they stick to what they were suggesting earlier and stick to that, if it is a rent control zone, then you'll play by the rules and you won't be able to up it. You're going to get a change of tenancy. The tenant's going to move out and you're going to be, say you are £200-300 behind, and you're going to look at that property and go, I'm not putting any money into this.
You're going to sell. That's what you're going to do.
Or you're going to sell, or else you're going to rent it out without putting new carpets in it, without redecorating it. The standard is
going to go down. One thing, starting off as a landlord like 30 years ago now, myself, I remember back in the days, you could rent anything in Edinburgh. I always say you could rent your granny's old house with your granny still in it. That was the market at the time.
She's dead or alive.
That was a bonus. But, that was the state of the market at the time. I was a tenant back then. You know, I didn't think that was fair. That wasn't right. You didn't have central heating, etc., etc. The market has moved on, but so has choice, because the market has changed a lot. So the consumer, renters, are much more choosy now. They're paying a lot more for it. But I think that's a good thing.
Great thing.
That's the
people should expect. They're paying a lot of money. They should expect quality.
And we as landlords should be delivering. So we should be providing better accommodation. So I think what we rent now is far, far better than what we rented 30 years ago. And my fear is we would start to see that slip and go back. And I don't want to see that.
And then it's a race to the bottom, and it's
backwards.
It is. And it need not be like that. And I hope it won't be like that. So let's be optimistic about it. But legislation, you know, you have to think about it. You know, every bit of legislation we've had in the last 25 years, it's been brought in all with good intentions. There's no question about that. But has it achieved what it set out to do? So we've still got rogue landlords out there. We've still got criminal landlords operating within our sector. That's our competition. We should be getting rid of them. We've got the legislation to do it. Why are they still operating? That's a big question we've got. Why have we got substandard accommodation? We've got a repairing standard. That was meant to deal with that, etc., etc. We'll have rent control. I'm sure we'll still have extortionate rents in the future. Because actually, the sad thing about all of this is the people who comply with all of this are the good landlords.
And the ones that get penalised.
The bad ones don't care.
They'll
still operate.
There is some controversy about the build-to-rent operators getting exempt. Did they just kind of bow to pressure because basically all the investment got pulled out and all these big pension funds and big developers pulled out of Scotland? So did they do a U-turn on that and just say, right, we'll give you an exemption so you can control your rents if this does happen?
It's partly the case. I think it's a bit unfair to say that's entirely the case. But yes, you know, we worked closely with investors. We campaigned alongside them. I believe there should be an exemption there because we need to encourage investment in Scotland. But they were saying, why should we come and put our money in Scotland? We can go to other parts of England. For instance, Manchester, they were saying we could invest in Manchester. We can get as much of a return in Manchester as we can in Edinburgh. But we don't need to worry about rent control and political differences and all of that that's happening up in Scotland. So we needed to go over that hurdle.
Do you think that's fair? That they should be allowed?
So, you know, then I think everybody should be exempt. So I don't want rent control for obvious reasons. We've discussed it. I don't think it's good for the overall market. So it'd be wrong for me to say they shouldn't be exempt because everybody should be, or it should be more nuanced than it is. They have a vital role to play because they can.
You can understand why
in certain areas of Scotland, and they can build at
New
scale.
And
we need housing. We need the houses.
We do, and we need the investment. And you and I can't do that to the extent that these institutional investors can. So yes, they can come in, especially in rural areas, out of city centre areas. They can come in and say, right, there's a need here. I'll build a whole new community of housing, and that would be fantastic. That's what we need. That's their role. And they can say, to a degree, they could even weather rent control, but they need to do their sums, and they're doing their sums 5-10 years time, much different to how we're operating. But that's has its role. That's got its place in housing in Scotland. But actually what I'm saying to politicians is, great, fine, do that for them. But you know what? See, the majority of housing that's provided in Scotland, over 95% of it, is provided by people like me, not your institutional investors. So if you're really worried about your stock and the provision of housing, it's us that you should be supporting, not necessarily them. But it needn't be a them and us scenario. That's where I'm coming from.
So the other one was...
So they need to support us as much as...
The other one was the purpose-built student accommodation. So this is probably more a question for the government because, you know, it's it's not really a sector that we operate in, but obviously they got exemption as well.
Yeah, and to be fair, a lot of our members are unhappy about that simply because they provide student accommodation as well. And they're saying, but these student providers don't need to comply with the same laws. They can end the tenancies. They can do the dual model of renting to tenants students during term time and holidaymakers during the
I
summer.
feel like that's massive at the moment, the purpose-built student accommodation. I don't know if you've noticed it around like Edinburgh and stuff like that. Certainly around Glasgow, there's huge plans and planning
Were you saying that the
applications.
biggest skyscraper in Scotland was going to be the student block in Glasgow?
Was it?
I thought it was you'd said in the podcast. There was some guest that came on.
Don't know,
So
but
there's
there's
been
massive
plans
schemes
everywhere.
going on.
Yeah.
Aye.
And not just in their big cities.
I wonder how that's going to affect the PRS then, because obviously, like you're saying, a lot of your members in our community and our properties, we've all probably got students in them. You've got your HMO. How's that going to affect the PRS? You think that's going to have an impact
I
on
think
demand?
we've been able to survive it, and I've got student accommodation as well. But I think the issue is that as long as there's an influx and an increase in the student numbers to our universities and colleges, the market will sustain it, because we need more accommodation. And as I say, you and I can't provide it on scale, but they can. So they can come in and, as you know, build these big blocks. The issue is, yes, those students don't have tenancy rights like what they would do if they're renting from us, and they're paying a hell of a lot more for it as well too. But it's brand new,
and
you
get a
know,
gym.
suite accommodation. It's a living experience, not
And
just a
they'll
flat.
only stay there for the first year, and they'll make their friends. They'll go and get an HMO or share a flat.
And I think that's what we need to. We're the follow-up accommodation provider,
We're
aren't
not the
we?
first port of call.
Because the institutional providers will never have the houses that we have.
Yeah.
So sporadic about the city and the areas where the students really
areas.
want to be living.
Yeah.
And as you say, they'll get their pals and they'll move in. And that's the natural move on. We are that move on accommodation. So I think the market naturally will sort itself out there. But, landlords, and they say to me all the time, said, John, this is not fair that they don't have to comply with the same rules. They're a landlord just the same. They're quite right.
Yeah,
they
right,
are. And that, I do think that is unfair. When you speak to the government about it, they'll say, but that's the way it's always been, because they're not classed as landlords. They're educational providers of homes for whilst people are there as students.
That's a nice spin on the words there.
So, well, they've got exemption because they're educational providers of accommodation. For
living rent are having a field day on this, so hopefully it'll take living rent. Take the pressure off us, and it'll put on.
And that's actually where I've got sympathy with Living Rent's campaign on that, because actually they're saying, at the end of the day, we're still paying. Don't care who our landlord is, but it's not fair that there's no control with that type of landlord, but there is with another, and so surely it should be the same for
the irony is that,
and that's what we're saying too.
If some of their members who are paying into a pension, it's actually probably coming back into their pension pots in some way or other.
Okay, it's the wider economy, isn't it? It's the cyclical
Do you know what I mean?
nature of it. And
if they are working,
and you know what? See, when we were all young, you want to change the world. You want to go out there and say, you challenge the injustices that are out there, and that's what tenants groups are doing. They're saying, actually, this is unfair on us, and we're paying a hell of a lot of money, not for a great deal of return in some cases. That's how they see it. They're consumers. They want their rights to be protected, and I get that. We would be saying the same thing in their shoes. And what I'm trying to say, and I think the bigger picture is as landlords, us round this table here, we're not that different in position from them. So we agree with them, actually. And actually, the only way for the whole private rented sector to work well is for both our rights to be protected and for landlords and tenants to work together.
A level playing field,
and find a private rented sector that works for everybody, not just for landlords or just for tenants.
EPC changes, where are we at with, because I've kind of given up.
Moving feast.
I've just given up on it. I was quite, I was following the house and bill and the rent controls, but I've got to say I struggle with EPC stuff. I kind of lost in that respect. So we've got the new heatings bill. They're going to change the EPC.
So we don't have the bill
system
yet because it's not laid before Parliament. So there's a big question about, will that happen? Because we've got the election next May. Might not happen. So what will happen then? There's certainly a commitment from government to introduce it. And
the new energy efficient standard, was it?
Yes, so the whole overall standard going forward. So as far as EPCs, we will see a new EPC next year. So that's the first change we're going to see. And there's going to be a focus more on the heat retention of the building, the property, as opposed to
The heat and
the fuel use and the fuel type. So that will be better because I don't know about you, but when I'm viewing properties, I used to hate the EPCs because I thought, I don't really understand what this is all about. And certainly the tenants don't. And you pay a lot of money for it. And it's there in the property, and I was viewing a property, and I would always say, and this has got an EPC rating or whatever, and the tenant would just say, what's it like? You know, how good's the furniture in it, or whereabouts is it located? They're not interested in price, not interested in EPC. But now they are. And I've only found out in the last maybe 18 months. Tenants are now saying to me, yes, but what is, not just what the EPC is, because I don't think it really tells them much, but they're asking the question, how much will it be for me to run this property? What are the heating bills? And actually, I can't answer that question because it depends how much you put it on for a start.
You hot-bodied, you cold-bodied, how much, you know.
Exactly. And I thought, but that's the questions they want answered quite rightly. In fact, I want them answered so I can sell my property to future renters. So the EPC will do that in the future. They'll talk about heat retention, which is all about insulation and things like that. So, and the government does say you have to get to a HRR rating, heat retention rating of level C, basically. That's what we'll be looking at in the future.
Do you think it's another thing to fear as landlords, or do you think
No, well, they're saying about 80% of the properties will already comply. So for most of us, but if you're in hard to treat properties in rural areas, traditional builds, you can't insulate them. In fact, it would be wrong to insulate some of these properties because it affects the fabric of the building. So there's lots of issues there around that. I think our biggest issue is the time scale of it, not the principle of it, but time scale to be brought in by the 1st of April 2028. But one of the new technical assessments they want to bring in, which would help us as landlords, it means we could get an assessment done that will tell us exactly what we need to do to our properties. I really want that as a landlord because I'm not skilled to understand all of that. But that won't come in until the end of 2028. But I need to comply by the 1st of April 2028. So the timing to us is all wrong. So we're campaigning for that to be changed. So, but it's all up in the air. And, you know, the question you might ask is, what should landlords do about improving the energy efficiency of their properties just now? I have to be honest and say, probably nothing.
I think I always say to someone, if they ask me, if you're doing a renovation on it now and it's full brick, then do it.
Of course.
Because
I think insulation's always a good thing because you can't really...
If you're retrofitting it, that's different. But
if it's
an existing property in the sector... I have to be honest and say I don't know how best to spend your money because there will be a cap you will be expected to not go beyond to improve the property, £10,000.
It's always funny. There's
but when does that kick in? So if I spend the money now and this doesn't come in for till 2028, will that count towards my 10,000 cap? We don't know that. Probably not. So why would I spend the money now? I'll just wait. The trouble is, if we wait until nearer the time as well, then everybody will be doing it and there'll be a lack of tradespeople in all of this business. So
I've got to say, it is something
very confusing.
I don't think you should get too worked up about as well.
Maybe it's choosing the right properties if you're adding them to the portfolio. Like, if looking at a section
I think that's happening. So when I'm talking to landlords, the positive stories is they're thinking, right, I'm reevaluating my portfolio. I'm looking at it in a different way as a business. And to be fair, we've not been good at doing that for landlords, especially if you just got one or two properties. The money comes in, it pays the costs. You maybe don't need the income from it because it's part of a pension plan as it has been for me. So you don't keep too much of an eye on it. As long as it washes its face, you're fine because you'll make your money eventually one day when you sell it. So that's fine, but I think nowadays we're having to look at the overall portfolio and think, right, what's performing well here? And some landlords, members of SAL, are saying to me, actually, do you know what? I know some are going to be harder to treat when it comes to energy efficiency in the future. So I'm going to put the money into, I'm buying other properties that are more efficient, more modern. And I think that's the way to look at it. Just look at your portfolio, look at your yield, look at what you're getting in rental. And if you have to spend £10,000 on it to improve the energy efficiency, is it worth it? Make it work better for you. Look at your financing. Maybe the days of high gearing on financing have gone, so it's a case of being more proportionate with that. So you can weather the storms of rent control, rising costs and still have a profitable business at the end of the day. And you scale up. Everybody knows that probably the days of just having one or two properties, I think those landlords will go.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see that. But anybody new coming into the sector is saying, right, I'm going to have to, even for LBTT purposes, buy 6+. So, yeah, that's another campaign. But I'm pleased you're going to raise that.
We're over the hour now. We need to.
We're going to keep going.
But so I think we're going to look at it more as a business in the future.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing.
I think it's a good thing
Brilliant.
too.
Right.
Yeah, the ADS one was, I'm assuming Sal had a lot of interference, a lot to say.
So recently, the last time I was in Parliament, this is something I raised, because obviously there's a lot of talk about how can we are in a housing emergency, what role can landlords play? I said there's a group called the Housing 2040 group, which is government-led by the Cabinet Secretary and stakeholders in the housing sector. And they're basically saying, right, what can we all do here to solve Scotland's housing problems? So one of them could be investing in new homes, and there's a lot of talk about that. But to do that, and that is what we need, but it takes time to build a new house. And that takes about £200,000-300,000 to build a family home in Scotland. That's what we're looking at. Probably about 2 years to go through planning and everything to achieve that. And I'm saying, okay, that's the cost to the public purse. But I said, see, to me as a landlord, if you turn around to me and say, do you know what, John, would you go out and buy another property for a family to live in? And that might cost, in some areas of Scotland, it could be £100,000. And saying, but do you know what, in return, we won't apply the EDS on that. So there's the best part of 10 grand.
Saved.
And okay, it will cost the tax purse effectively, but actually...
Or will incentivise you to buy the 45,000 empty homes in Scotland.
But when you think about it, to the public purse, there's £8,000, £10,000 that otherwise would cost 200,000, 300,000. And if I invest in that tomorrow, there's a house as soon as the conveyancing goes through, straight into the sector. I'm not building something from scratch. That's a no-brainer to me. That's cheaper to the public purse to give that landlord that tax break, and that is what it will be seen as. But it could be conditional. It could say, right, I'm only going to allow you to do that, John, and give you that break if you make sure this is invested in rented accommodation for a period of time, whatever that period of time, or buying empty homes or whatever. Target it. Yeah, and that's a quick, easy way.
We've had a lot of people trying to claim back the ADS by looking at the government's or HMRC's rules on what you can claim back, and no one's been successful in it. And you're saying, if it's been empty for 2 years, it's uninhabitable. And I've tried it before in the past and kind of gave up on it, because you'll take a picture of a property you've bought, sitting empty for 7 or 8 years, it's roof's in, it's not even got a functional bathroom. You're like, this is uninhabitable. Why am I paying ADS in this? What? This is not a you're taking this property that's lying empty, there's a problem, and you're putting it back into the housing stock.
And the whole idea was to stop people buying second homes and just leaving them lie empty.
And that was my argument when we went on that call with when they had a call with some landlords for the housing bill to try and get some input. And I says, why are we paying ADS if we're buying a tenanted property? Because we're not taking any stock from the homeowners to buy first time buyers. We're actually buying it with a tenant sitting in place, and we're putting it into our investment portfolio. So we're not really shifting. Exactly. It's not shifting, changing hands.
This is the cause we're championing just now, and I'm on record in talking about it in Parliament. So, and at our conference last week, Paul McLennan was there standing in for the Cabinet Secretary. We had a panel debate at the end of the day with some politicians, and he said certainly they're looking at that, and the Cabinet Secretary has said that to me. So, but obviously there's the powers that be need to discuss that, and
then at the end of the day, though, there's a £20 billion black hole that needs to be filled in the country, and who are they going to target?
Easy target.
Anyone with
assets. Landlords are going to fill it. There you go.
Exactly. So, but anyway, John,
what's next for Sal? Sorry, I'd like to know more about Sal. What was next for Sal's plans going forward? That's almost 25 years.
I know. So
another 25 years of John Blackwood.
No, I don't think I'll survive that, or I will survive that. But I think certainly we've got a strategy online if anybody wanted to go and have a wee look at it, which is what our vision and our mission is for the future. We've very much in the last 25 years been reactionary to all these bits of legislation, because it's another month, there's something else coming out, and we have to then fight that cause. I want to really try and change that narrative, get away from landlord bad, tenant good, to look at how can we have a PRS that works for everyone, and get ahead of the game and drive some of the narrative and the changes. There will always be changes in the PRS. There'll always be new legislation, but we want it to support us, and support everybody within the sector. Okay. So these are the things we're looking at. What could that look like? And I'm saying to government now, you just need to tell us what the PRS should be doing in Scotland. I want to know, how big should it be? Is it too big? Is it too small? Do you need us? Do you really not want individual landlords? We're investors. Just be honest with us. We'll put our money somewhere else. We'll go and invest in something else.
Gold or cryptocurrency.
We'll sell up. Just tell us. If that's the direction of travel. And when we're having those conversations, no, we really value, we need you because we know how large you are in the sector. Yeah, but that's not how it comes across.
When you're putting in these tax...
So the politicians'
we need to
answer.
Change all of that. And yes, but we need to see action.
Yeah.
And that's what we're pushing for. So that's very much going to be our mantra. So we want a better PRS. Yeah. We want one that's sustainable. We want to encourage people to invest. Back to what we were saying earlier about being a landlord. I'm a landlord. I'm actually quite proud to be a landlord. I've invested a little bit of money that I've had over the years into property rather than in the stock market for the fat cats to cream off. Actually, I quite like the idea.
Someone's benefiting from your investment.
Putting it into property, which I feel safe in doing because it's my business. But I like the idea that I'm providing a home for somebody to live in. And I think that's quite a good thing. And I think we should be encouraging more people to do it.
I mean, when you take pride in the home that you're providing as well, you're doing a good service, I believe.
Great. And yes, I'm doing it to make money. Of course, that's why I'm doing it. It's a business, Great, but can't we all benefit from that in the longer term and utilise what wealth, if that's the right word, we all have to help support our local communities? And we will always, your big institutional investors, we will always have the advantage of providing these single units in areas where people want to live that nobody else will be buying up.
Yeah, they won't buy them all up. Yeah.
And I think that's our URL, as it were. So
brilliant. We'll put a link in the show notes to our website where people can obviously join up.
Please join, if you're not a member, join. We need you to come on board.
Great value for money.
Support you.
It's a great support system as well. Like, we've used it a lot over the years. Brilliant.
Fantastic. And thanks for your time today, John. Trekking over from the east.
Lovely to be here.
Over to the west.
Great to be on the podcast as well. So
safe journey home. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Cheers.